Welcome to the Voice Summit here in Newark, New Jersey. We are at NJIT, and I'm very excited about this next conversation with Dr. Ed Doran, who is the co-founder of Microsoft Cortana and currently the Director of Product Management in the Research Division. And so please tell us a bit about yourself and what you do at Microsoft.
Well, thanks for having me here today.
Absolutely.
It's been a great day at Voice. It's exciting to be here because I run into all my friends.
Yes.
It's a really small world in AI. It's a smaller world in voice. I think you and I know a lot of the same people. But we're really here to talk about what's changing in voice and AI. And what's exciting about this for me is that we're hitting this inflection point. So remember like when the web got traction and took off, and when mobile got traction and took off, and you built this ecosystem of new companies and new experiences. That's what's happening with voice. And so MSR, Microsoft Research, is really excited about how do we invent the new science, the new engineering that's going to light up that ecosystem.
Right. What's the primary thing that you're focused on in terms of research and in terms of like developing this ecosystem moving forward? Is there something that you're magnetized to most right now?
Well, this is, I'm a born scientist, so I'm kind of a kid in a candy shop for this stuff. MSR's got thousands of people around the world in the US, China, India, all over, and they're doing great stuff. And what I'm finding is the things we're building have certainly hit an inflection point. We've hit human parity for speech recognition, transcription, translation, object recognition.
Right.
But you can start to bring those things together in interesting ways. Just last week, we did a really cool announcement where we had one of our executives walk out on stage, make a brief announcement, and then we immediately built a life-size hologram of her, had her make the same announcement, but in Japanese and in her voice.
And that was at Inspire.
Yep.
And that was a very big deal.
Yeah.
When that happened, I think the viral momentum around shareability of that moment must have exceeded the expectations of Microsoft's marketing people, because I think it was something like, what did we just see?
Yeah.
We're living in the future right now. I imagine that Microsoft is able to do things that no other company can do, just in the sense that it's the largest market cap company in the world, and incredible resources. What's it like to be a scientist in an environment where you have the ability, the people, the manpower, the position, the platform, the money to do some really wonderful things as a kid in a candy store?
Well, it's great because there's always something more to do. So for example, we're getting really good at speech recognition, right? I mean, in control tests, we're actually at past human parity, but there's always going to be some words we don't recognize. Names, new words that are being minted. So our Montreal lab just invented a new technology. They put it out on GitHub, so you can play with it.
Yeah.
That looks at the phonic structure of words, so it can identify words that aren't even in the dictionary. So for example, if I go to a really good system and I say my name, Ed Doran, I've had it come back translated as Dad's boring, which once your kids hear that, they're going to say, Dad, it's a multi-billion-dollar AI system. You can't argue with science.
That's funny.
I'm going to be boring forever. With a phonic system, you can recognize Ed Doran as unique words, even if it doesn't know those words.
Right.
So we're trying to invent the new things, but then we're trying to push them out on Git, and we're trying to share them with the community so we can build that ecosystem that we were talking about.
Yes.
Other companies should get started. New startups should happen, and we want to make the tools that make that happen.
Now, are you based in Seattle?
I am, yes.
Okay, and do you spend most of your time there, like working with a local team, or do you have to travel quite a bit for your responsibilities at Microsoft?
So I spend the majority of my time in Seattle. I do travel to meet with the other labs. I was in Cambridge last week. They're doing some fascinating work that we're going to be excited to talk about. We've got the India lab coming up and the China lab behind that. It's interesting to have a global community because it gives you a much more diverse set of people and a much more inclusive set of scientists and engineers who are going to be at the table. One of the challenges with a lot of the new tech is you have to keep your eye out for biases and for limitations in scope that just don't need to be there. And by having thousands and thousands of researchers around the world, we get a chance to try to bring more people to the table and hopefully have a more diverse perspective.
Right. It's said that there's three types of futurists: the real futurists, the scientists, the doctors like yourself, that through studying what is and what should be make some logical predictions. Then there's those that are casting vision, right? They're like, speaking forth what could be, and then those that are just working to build the future. Would you consider yourself a futurist? And if you would, what kind of category or categories do you feel like, I'm a scientist, I'm a doctor, that's my thing. Or no, I feel like I kind of embody the visionary. I like to cast a vision and build it. Can you talk to us a bit about how you think of yourself and your responsibility in this industry as somebody that's, predicting or maybe just creating the future?
That's a great question. I don't think I'm smart enough to be a futurist, honestly. And I only became a doctor because I didn't want to be Mr. Ed. I could at least be Dr. Ed.
Dr. Ed is just right.
I think we're bad at predicting the future, at least as far as I can tell. I love reading old predictions of what the future is going to look like. Some of my favorites are, they thought people would asphyxiate on steam trains because the train would go faster than people could run, so you obviously couldn't get enough air in your lungs, and you'd die if you rode a train.
Wow.
Clearly not the case. The reality is we're terrible at predicting the future, but we're great at building it.
Yeah.
So what I think we need are really smart, forward-looking people who talk about this is the future we should build, and then we need scientists and engineers who want to chase that dream and help build the future that we should have.
Right.
So I think it's going to be that combination of the people you described, but I think making the future you want is key, and that's why makers like yourself, like your audience, are so crucial, because they're making those steps towards the future we want to have.
Right. What is the future that you want to have for your great-great-great-grandchildren that you'll never meet, but that you're kind of laying groundwork of development that should impact humanity? Like, what are you looking toward when you're gone, but the impact you're making for generations to come?
Mainly that they won't say I was boring, or that I was chosen by an AI system as boring. I think you see the seeds of that right now. I mean, if you told yourself not that long ago that you can pick up a device in your pocket and talk to almost anyone on the planet, regardless of whether you spoke their language or not, you'd be shocked.
Right.
But you have essentially a supercomputer in your pocket. You have Teams or Skype. You can make the call. You can use translator from any number of companies to speak that language. You're breaking down those barriers between the 7 billion people that roam the planet.
Right.
I think I'd like to see us getting farther and farther with that vision. Can we make the world more collaborative? Can we make the world more conversational?
Right.
And ultimately, because we collaborate and converse with each other, can we make the world more empathetic? For me, the primary goal of AI is empowerment, and I think that's where empathy becomes really crucial.
What do you think is the best possible scenario for AI at scale without a moment of singularity? Just the track of things going. In your mind, what's a great scenario of AI? When you hear Elon Musk talk about the Neuralink, I'm not sure if you saw that. I mean, it was quite fascinating. And at the end, he's like, and monkeys are controlling computers. And his staff's like, you weren't supposed to say that. That's a secret. So when you look at some of these developments and you think about not AI getting a soul or anything that's fantastical, and which usually leads to dystopic movies, but just science. What do you think it looks like in a great outcome?
That's a great question. I realize that like the most compelling technologies are things that fade farthest to the background.
Yeah.
So if you think about even calling it technology, to a teenager today, having a smartphone is not technology. It's just always been.
Yeah.
Of course you have a smartphone. Of course you can go on the web. I'd like to see AI empowering people, but falling to the background and doing things based on working for you. So for example, if the highest power of AI is to empower you, then its job is to advise, its job is to inform, its job is to give you capabilities that you don't already have.
Right.
So the AI of the future that's really exciting are the things that put humans in the center, where humans can exercise judgment and creativity and do the things they're passionate about. And AI is a supporting capability in that role. And we know this is right. If you look at the studies that look at AI that advise doctors and compare the outcomes of doctors alone, AI systems alone, and doctors who are advised by AI, clear and away the winner are the doctors who are advised by AI. The AI never replaced them. The AI never got between them and her, that surgeon and her patient.
Right.
But the AI helped them do what they were most passionate about. And so the future that's really exciting is an AI that knows you, that empowers you, and moves out of your way so you can do what you want to do.
Yes. I've had more executives say good things about your CEO than I think any other Fortune 50 CEO. Like, people are very, very thankful for the outcome. What's it been like for you to have such a radical shift from the way things were 5 years ago in the greater Microsoft ecosystem and the way things have become? I mean, I think Inspire, right, last week, like that was a really great kind of flag in the ground. Like, we haven't just hit these metrics. Like, here we are. We're here to display something. I mean, his keynote was fascinating. I'm getting texts like about it, and I'm tuning into the live stream and thinking to myself, I should have definitely gone and been there. But can you just talk a bit about the CEO at the greater Microsoft and the leadership, and kind of your thoughts on what's been developed, the ecosystem there?
Well, I think I'm an incredibly lucky person. I work in Microsoft Research. Bill Gates had the vision 30 years ago to create Microsoft Research and to say, we need some really talented people who are going to look ahead and do hard things that can take decades to get done, but that's where the future gets minted. And I inherited that amazing investment and view of the future. And then put me in that context and then say, I have a CEO who feels deeply and passionately about things that really matter. He's deeply and passionately spoken extensively about privacy, respecting your privacy of the customers, about empowering his employees. Yeah. So I feel incredibly lucky because I'm in this environment where decades of great research have happened and a mass of incredible people have been brought together, and we're empowered by a CEO who believes in things like privacy, diversity, and empowerment. I couldn't ask for a better situation.
Well, I think that you saying that it just goes right along with the drumbeat I keep hearing from other people in a similar position that you have, whether they're directly there or they're impacted by it. 1,000 years ago, our ancestors, they built castles. The dukes and the princesses, I mean, that's what they did. They built castles, and they committed a dozen generations, right? It's a 300-year commitment from when you have a vision for a castle, and your kids, your great-grandkids, never going to enjoy the castle. It's for so far from there. It's for a region. It's for a purpose. It's for protection. It's for royalty and all those different things. What do you feel like is the castle of your life in your career? And do you think much about that kind of long-term, like a lot of what ultimately happens, you may never even see, because it's just the beginning of things?
That's a great question. If we think about what is our modern day castle, I think it's two things. One is we have fundamentally a platform orientation. We want to build an extremely capable platform with democratized tools that anyone can build on. If you think about earlier inflections in technology and you were thinking about mobile, when people were designing mobile phones, I was one of them. Nobody said, we've got to have a GPS for dating. Yep, that's it. No, right. We wanted a GPS for mapping. Right. Someone else built an amazing company and entirely new experiences coming out of that. Right. So building a platform that has great capabilities, that actively looks to identify and address biases in the platform, and then creates tools for people to build their own business, their own startup, is incredibly valuable. The other thing that I think goes with that is we've invested massively in individual level guidance. So you've heard of Fat AI. So fair, accountable, transparent AI systems. By the way, if I ever become a DJ, dibs on Fat AI is my name. You want it? We've built the Ether committee that goes through and talks about what is ethical AI, what's accountable AI, what's transparent AI. And then we even founded the Partnership for AI together with Google and Facebook and Apple to say whatever gets built on these platforms should serve to make a better world. Okay. So I think the castle is the platform that we build with those capabilities and we make it accessible to everyone. Right. But also the principles to say, because AI is hard and expensive, let's do this in a way that makes life better for everyone. So I think those two things.
It's a great answer. I think because I probably want to be sensitive to your time and to the folks that are tuned in. Everybody's very short attention span. Everything's very, very quick. But let me ask you this in terms of, do you mind if I ask you an ethereal question?
Go for it.
So if I described our body as the thing that represents us that's connected to Earth, as our mind, as the part of us that's connected to ourself, our soul connected to another, and our spirit connected to a supernatural, whatever that may be. When you think about technology as a scientist, do you think about things beyond the mind and the body? Are you thinking about the soul or the spirit, if those are two separate things? Does that come into conversation? Is that talked about? If it is, like, what is kind of the general response of the more ethereal side of whatever this is that we are experiencing as humanity?
Wow, that's a complex question. I think for those of us doing research, we use a different nomenclature, but I think there's interesting overlaps.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have an analytical framework for addressing the world, but that's not enough. The things in the world we address are complicated and hard, and you often fail before you win. And if you win, you have to realize sometimes it's a fail because it's a local optima, not a global optima.
Yeah.
So not only do you have an analytical framework, you have to have passion for the work. You have to want it with your heart to get things done. And the most interesting scientists are those that not only have an analytical framework, but they have deep passion to deliver these things. And then they do them with a large community, which ties to your comment about souls. So let me give you an interesting example. When you think about voice, a lot of people say, well, okay, it's just a new mode of interaction.
Yeah.
Or it's a mechanism to make things more accessibility. But the reality is, we all need that mechanism, right? You may need voice because you have some challenges to being sighted. You may need voice temporarily because you were injured. You may need voice situationally because you're driving a car and you can't take your eyes off the road. It's a fundamental way of looking at the world. Now, we have a researcher who built something called Soundscape. It's on Git. You can take a look at it. But essentially says, because he wanted to build a voice experience and a sound experience because he's not sighted, and he wanted that to be rich and three-dimensional. So you can walk around the world, interact with voice, and see the world in three-dimensional ways. This object is there and you're passing it. That object is in the distance. It's a really good example. I think Soundscape is great because it's built on deep analytical frameworks that are mental. It's driven out of the passion of the researchers to create a better world for everyone, whether you're situationally or permanently challenged for vision. And it's built with a community of people who've picked it up and extended it. So I almost argue the best products come from your heart and your mind and your community.
That's great. If somebody is younger and they had a chance to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you that's not being recorded and it's private, and you're having this conversation, and they turn to you and they say, hey, can you give me advice? Like, let's say they're in their early 20s to early 40s, but they're on the younger side of their career. What is your advice to the older millennials, the younger Gen X age? Like, what type of direction, like, where do you point young people to today in general in their career or in education? Because things are so different today than they were for you and for Steve Jobs and for Bill Gates and for many of the other scientists and innovators in the tech world. It's a completely different ballgame today, and there's not necessarily a due north for getting educated, getting mentored, getting trained, finding the right space to thrive. So do you have advice that's general to everybody if you were given that question from one specific person?
Wow, you get some great questions today.
Oh, thanks.
I typically, when I'm mentoring someone who's looking for advice on their path forward, what I try to tell them is there are no directly linear paths. Everyone follows their own interesting path. In fact, the most interesting people that I've ever worked with are, one, usually had a very complex path to get to where they are, and two, usually spent a fair amount of time in the principal's office when they were in grade school. I've taken a poll, literally. I have been in a dining room of Harvard Business School and asked for a show of hands, and I have the data to back that up. There are plenty of people who tell you that there's only one path, or that you have to have certain things to be qualified to have a new idea, to do a new thing, or go someplace they haven't been before, and none of that is true. I have been turned down for jobs at some of the best companies in the world. I'm still doing fine.
Right.
My individual path has been complex. I started off life doing genetic engineering, then went back and ended up doing master's and PhD in statistics and hardware. I've done done some management consulting in financial firms. I've done new technology. And all of those experiences give me a unique perspective and give me something to build on.
Yeah.
So start today. Don't let anyone tell you you can't. And take an interesting, winding path, because everything you learn on that path is going to make you better.
I have no more questions. Just gratitude that I got to spend some time with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be back with another interview in just a moment.